On behalf of Relegate Capital Markets, the London Stock Exchange, Dorsey and Whitney, Ernst & Young, Dua Associates and the TMF Group, I'd like to welcome you to the Listing in London Forum, that we are hosting today. This is part of what will be a week-long series of seminars across India, where we will be meeting with high-growth companies such as yourselves that are looking to raise capital, more importantly to do so intelligently, than to just push another IPO into what are volatile Indian markets today. Actually, this volatility, if you think back for the last 2 or 3 years, has always been there, right? In India and across the globe, we've had periods of markets opening, we've had periods of markets closing, we've had windows of opportunity, and those windows will present themselves every now and again. If we think back, historical context here, right, and go back 5, 6, 7 years from today, the IPO market, right, which is the principal venue for Indian companies to raise equity capital, was very heavily retail dominated. You didn't have as many institutional investors invest into India as you did later on. To tap international markets, you used the ADR or the GDR route. What started to happen around 2005, 2006, as growth in India not only started accelerating, but got noticed elsewhere, is the rush of investors to get FII licenses and move into the region increased. And you started seeing this shift away from a retail-dominated investment pattern in IPOs to an institutional-dominated pattern where you started to see the definition of a QIB emerge, you started to see the QIB books get oversubscribed by 10, 12, 15, numbers such as that, right? A lot of money coming into the economy through the FII route over a period of 3 to 4 years. And then in 2008, we hit the first speed bump where Lehman happened. And while the West suffered more than the emerging economies, you never really had that decoupling that people were looking for, right? So the Indian market suffered as well. You had money leave the system. And while some of that money has come back, it hasn't really come back in the way that we saw them deploying funds pre the crisis. In 2009, you had this window that lasted a few months where you had a rush of capital in. A lot of that was as a result of quantitative easing in the West. Money that was pumped into economies found its way to higher yielding investments across Asia. Well, that quantitative easing has now sort of withered away, with the Western economies going through their own fiscal issues, unclear how much more money will come in. And what all of this means is that we will have equity capital markets in this part of the world that will continue to differentiate. Some investors will want to look at the larger caps in India and just play that, right? Other investors will want to be very, very industry specific. But the one-size-fits-all type investment, I think for the foreseeable future, the short term, is not really necessarily going to be there. So what does that mean? What does that mean for the fast-growing Indian corporate, right? What do? Do you look at private equity? Well, yes, we have a very robust private equity industry in India. We've got upwards of hundreds of funds that operate in the country. But with private equity comes a time commitment, due diligence, and governance that may include board seats, etc. That will certainly be one route that many companies will go down and be successful at. But that won't be sufficient for certain companies that are looking for slightly different, more public style capital, but unable to seek it given the volatility that we have in the markets, right? We are in a situation today where investors in one region may not be willing to invest in, pick a company, pick a sector, clean technology, right? But you may find investors, public market, institutional investors, in a separate geography, in a separate part of the world, who actually have money to put to work but don't have attractive assets in their jurisdiction and would be looking to deploy funds. So there's an inefficiency there, right? And the point of this forum, and the point of what we have been doing at Religare, given that we have built up what we call an equity distribution pipe across the globe, is to match up companies that require capital with investors across the globe that have the ability to invest capital in a manner that there is an efficient flow of funds across the globe. This doesn't necessarily mean that you can arbitrage the system, right, and try to get a better deal elsewhere while your home market may be closed or subject to extreme volatility. Instead, the idea is to widen the pool of investors that can invest in your company, right? In some cases, to tap specialist pools of investors that maybe understand your industry better, that require a certain amount of growth data in their portfolio, right? Maybe looking for a specific growth profile in Asia and don't necessarily have the ability to do so given the companies that they can invest in their home markets, right? London is one such destination. I'm going back 20 years when I started in this industry, and I started in this industry in New York, right? Which in those days used to be, to some extent, the center of the financial universe. If you were looking for various types of capital, New York is where you came. Sure, London was a money center, but New York used to be, for all intents and purposes, your main destination. I've seen over the course of the last 20 years that change, and you'll hear more about that today. And for all intents and purposes, London today has become the center of the universe when it comes to financial capital, right? And what we have found in India is that it has become a preferred destination for Indian companies that are looking to tap specialist investor pools, to widen the net of investors that they talk to. And as we go on today, what we are going to do is focus, as part of this widening of the net, on the London market and what it means to us, right? A number of Indian companies have already undertaken this journey, both large and small, and have listed on the London markets, right? There have been certain valuable lessons that have been learned, and we will go through that today with you, so that for the next wave, or the continuing wave of companies that evaluate London as a listing destination, you know what to look out for. You know what the issues are that are going to come up, and you know how you should prepare up front. And I think the most important takeaway today, right, from my perspective, is the preparation that you will need to undergo for a listing in the London markets. As we all know, when you start to think about a destination outside India as your listing venue, there are certain regulations that need to be adhered to in India and in the overseas market. There are issues around offshoring that you need to be very cognizant of. There are governance norms and best practices that are accentuated in certain markets that we need to be cognizant of. And there are reporting requirements that are not necessarily more onerous, but slightly different. And these are all issues that, as I have talked to various corporates around India, keep coming up. And the point of this conference is to have one banker, accountant, law firms, and most importantly, the LSE itself be here to address these for you and to talk about them. So what we are going to do is we're going to ask each one of these constituents to spend a few minutes talking about what they do best, talking about the London listing process. What we ask is that you hold your questions till the end, and I promise you this we'll go through this very quickly. And thereafter, please ask all the questions that you have. This is the point of this forum was to do that. While we'll have enough time during and post lunch to have a one-on-one discussion, I think there are other companies that will benefit from questions that each one of us asks. So I would encourage you to put your phones and Blackberries off for the next 2 hours or so. Let's focus in on this. Let's ask the questions we need to, and and we'll be here as long as we need to post the formal presentation to spend time with you as well. So with that, can I ask Richard Webster Smith from the LSE to come and officially start the discussion.